If I told you that waiting one more year to invest in property could cost you over $250,000, would you believe me? And look, before you dismiss this as clickbait, I'm going to show you the exact maths behind why the safest decision you think you're making is actually the most expensive one you'll ever make. So stay tuned. And later in this video, I'm going to show you real examples. 3 investors, all with similar opportunities, different timelines. One waited for the perfect market, one waited for rates to drop, and one just got started. By the end, you'll see how much the first 2 left on the table. And spoiler alert, it's brutal. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Aaron, and if you're new here, we break down real property investment strategies for Australians who are tired of playing it safe and ready to build actual wealth. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. You've probably heard this advice 1,000 times. Wait until the market settles. Wait for rates to drop. Wait until you're more confident. Wait until you've saved more money. And every single time you hear it, it feels wise, doesn't it? It feels cautious. It feels safe. But here's the problem. Safety in property investing doesn't mean you should wait. In fact, the longer you wait, the less safe your financial future actually becomes. Think about it this way. Over the last decade, every single investor who waited for the perfect conditions, every single one watched property values climb while they sat on the sidelines. And the crazy part, they convinced themselves they were being prudent. They convinced themselves that timing the market was somehow possible. It's not. So look, in this video, I'm going to break down why waiting is one of the most expensive decisions you'll ever make. I'm talking about real numbers. We're going to look at case studies, calculations, and actual outcomes from investors who waited versus those who didn't. And by the end of this, I want you to understand something. The risk isn't investing. The risk is waiting. We're also going to tackle the specific reasons why you think waiting is safer, because they sound legitimate, right? They do. But when you see the data, when you see what actually costs you in lost equity, in missed capital growth, in compound returns you never captured, you'll realize that waiting isn't cautious. It's expensive. And if you're ready to understand why waiting for the perfect time is actually the myth that's costing Australian property investors the most money, I want you to keep watching. All right, so let me set the scene. It's November 2025. We've had interest rate movements. We've had media coverage around property market being uncertain. And everywhere you look, there's someone telling you to wait. Wait for rates to stabilize. Wait for recession fears to pass. Wait for the market to reset. Wait, wait, wait. And here's what's interesting. This advice isn't new. This is the same advice people were giving in 2015, 2018, 2020, 2022, and in 2023. Let me ask you something. How many of those people who took that advice are now sitting on millions of dollars in equity? The answer, 0, because they were waiting. Every other investor was building wealth. Now, I'm not saying the market never corrects. It does, right? Markets fluctuate. That's normal. But here's what actually happens. Even during corrections, property owners who got in early have more equity, more options, and more financial security than the people who waited for stability. Think about Sydney. Someone who bought in Western Sydney in 2018 might have felt nervous. The media was full of stories about market softness. But that same person is now sitting on hundreds of thousands in equity, even if they bought at a local peak. Why? Because time in the market beats timing the market every single time. But here's where it gets really interesting. The people who waited, they're not sitting on equity. They're sitting on regret. They're sitting on spreadsheets where they've calculated how much money they'd have if they just started. And those calculations are devastating. And the worst part, after they wait through 2023, 2024, and into 2025, they're still waiting because there's always a new reason. Rates might go up again. We might have a recession. The media might say something scary on the evening news. And before you know it, 5 years have passed. And they've accumulated 0 properties, 0 equity, and 0 progress towards the retirement they want. So here's what we're actually going to talk about today. We're going to look at why waiting feels safe, because your brain is wired to avoid short-term pain. And then we're going to look at what it actually costs you in long-term wealth, because that's the real risk assessment. Not what if the market drops, but what if I've waited so long that I've missed the greatest wealth building opportunity of my lifetime. Let's start with the maths. I want you to really absorb this because this is where the financial reality of waiting becomes undeniable. Imagine two investors. Let's call them Alex and Jordan. Both are 35 years old. Both have $100,000 for a deposit. Both live in Melbourne. Alex decides to buy a property today. He finds a solid investment property in the outer suburb. Let's say $500,000 value, $100,000 deposit, and a $400,000 loan. It's a reasonable rental yield. It's cash flow positive, and he gets started. Jordan looks at the same property and thinks, you know what? The market might drop. Rates might fall. I'll wait 2 years and then buy. So he sits on his $100,000 while Alex starts building equity. Now, what actually happens over those 2 years? In Melbourne, the historical average property growth is around 4 to 5% per year compounding. Let's use 4% as a conservative figure. So that $500,000 property, in 2 years, it's worth roughly $541,000. That's $41,000 in new equity that Alex has captured just by being in the game. But here's where it gets interesting. Jordan's $100,000 is sitting in a savings account. If he's lucky, he's getting 2, maybe 2.5% interest. So after 2 years, his $100,000 is now $105,000. He's made $5,000 in interest. Meanwhile, Alex hasn't just captured the $41,000 in property growth. He's also been paying down his mortgage through rental income. Let's say the property rents out for $300 a week. That's about $15,500 a year after expenses, so council rates, maintenance, insurance, and vacancy rates. He's cash flow positive by about $150 a month. So over 2 years, that's an extra $3,600 he's captured in actual cash flow. Add the capital growth, add the rental income, and Alex is ahead by approximately $45,000. Jordan, he's made $5,000. The spread is $40,000, and Jordan hasn't even felt the full impact yet. Because here's the thing about property, it's leveraged growth. Alex's $400,000 loan is now sitting on a property worth $541,000. That's $41,000 of growth on his $100,000 deposit. That's a 41% return on his capital in just 2 years, before you even factor in the tax benefits or the psychological advantage of owning something. But let's say Jordan does buy that property now. In year 3, it's still $541,000. But now Alex has 2 properties, or he's refinanced and bought a second one. Because that equity he built, he can leverage it. He can use the increased equity to build a deposit on a second property. That's where compound growth in property becomes devastating to the person who waited, because Alex isn't just ahead by $40,000. By year 5, that gap has widened to over $100,000. By year 10, we're talking about a multi-property portfolio for Alex, while Jordan is still trying to catch up on his first purchase. And this is assuming the market grows at only 4%. Most suburbs grow faster than that over a decade, so these numbers are actually conservative. Now, let's talk about why we fall for this waiting trap in the first place, because it's not stupidity. It's actually a very normal human pattern. It's called loss aversion, and it's built in your brain. Your brain is wired to avoid short-term pain more than it's wired to pursue long-term gain. This is why every person who's ever thought about starting a diet knows how hard it is. This is why every person who's ever thought about starting a business feels paralyzed before they begin. And this is why every person who's considered buying an investment property talks themselves out of it. Because buying a property is scary in the short term. You're taking on debt. You're committing capital. You're putting yourself out there. And the media makes it worse. Every time you open the news, there's a story about something that could go wrong. Property markets in turmoil. Interest rates threaten buyers. Experts warn of recession. And your brain latches on to that fear. because your brain is designed to protect you from threats. But here's what your brain isn't good at: calculating the long-term wealth destruction from inaction. Your brain can't visualize the pain of missing out because the pain isn't immediate. It's distributed across years, even decades. So waiting feels safe. It doesn't feel like you're avoiding risk. But what you're actually doing is you're transferring risk from the property market to your retirement. You're betting that not investing will work out better than investing. And historically, that bet has never paid off. Let me give you a real example. I was talking to an investor a few months back. Let's call him Mark, right? Mark is 52. He's had the same corporate job for 20 years. He's been meaning to invest in property for about 15 years. And you know what stopped him? He's been waiting for three things to align: rates to drop, the market to correct, and him to feel ready. Guess what? Rates have gone up and down multiple times. The market has corrected and recovered, and he still doesn't feel ready. So he's now 52 with no investment properties, no equity outside of his home, and 10 years until retirement. The cost of his waiting, potentially millions of dollars in retirement security. And Mark's not unique. I see this pattern constantly. People waiting for the same mythical moment of perfect conditions. And that moment never comes. The conditions are always going to be uncertain. There's always going to be a reason to wait. But the people building wealth, they're not waiting, they're acting. Here's something most people don't think about when they're waiting: leverage. In property, you can buy a $500,000 asset with a $100,000 deposit. That's a 5-to-1 leverage ratio. And while you own that property, three things are happening simultaneously. First, the property is appreciating in value. Second, you're paying down the debt through rental income. And third, you're building equity that you can leverage for the next purchase. But here's what happens when you wait. Let's say you wait 3 years before buying your first property. Those 3 years, you didn't benefit from leverage, but it gets worse, because in those 3 years, while you were accumulating a bigger deposit, let's say you managed to save an extra $50,000, the property market has moved up. Now you're buying a more expensive property, or you're buying in a worse location, or you're buying something that doesn't perform as well. And then, because you didn't leverage working for you for those 3 years, you can't refinance and buy a second property as quickly as someone who started earlier. So this is the hidden compounding effect of waiting. You're not just missing the growth on one property, you're missing the multiplier effect of being able to buy multiple properties across your investing lifetime. Think about it like this. If you buy one property every 4 years and you start at an age of 35, by retirement at 65, you bought 8 properties. But if you start at 39 because you waited 4 years, you've only bought 7. That's 30 years of opportunity cost. All because you waited for the perfect conditions at the beginning. Now, let's assume each of those properties appreciates at 5% per year. By the time you retire, property 1 is worth significantly more than properties you bought later. That's the power of early leverage. That's what waiting costs you. Person who started early doesn't just have one more property, they have a portfolio where the oldest properties are worth substantially more, generating more rental income, giving them more equity to leverage. This is why I say waiting isn't cautious, it's expensive, because you're not just delaying the investment, you are actively reducing the multiplier effect of leverage across your investing lifetime. Now, remember I said I'd show you the exact scenario with 3 real investors. Let me do that now, because this crystallizes everything we've been discussing. So 3 investors, all in 2022, all had the same opportunity to buy a property in a growing Melbourne suburb. All had $150,000 available for a deposit. Investor 1, let's call him Alex. Alex sees the opportunity and buys in 2022. The property costs $500,000. He uses $150,000 as a deposit. Gets a $350,000 loan. It's at 6% interest rate at the time. He rents it out at $350 per week. It's cash flow neutral. Maybe slightly negative in some months, but he's in. Investor 2, let's call her Sarah. Sarah looks at the same property and thinks, rates are rising. This is risky. I'm going to wait for rates to drop. and the market to settle, she holds on to her $150,000 in cash and waits. And then we've got investor 3, Michael. Michael's in the middle. He waits 1 year to see what happens. In 2023, he buys the same type of property in the same suburb because prices have gone up. It's now worth $540,000. He uses his $150,000 as a deposit and gets a $390,000 loan. The rates are high by then, 7%, and rents have also gone up to $370 per week, which helps out with his bigger loan. Now, fast forward, November 2025, 3 years later. Let's see what's happened. So Alex's outcome. His property is now worth approximately $560,000. That's $60,000 in capital growth. He's paid down his loan by about $30,000 through rental income and extra repayments. His equity has grown from $150,000 to $240,000. He's captured equity, he's captured rental income, and he's built enough equity to potentially buy a second property if he refinances. His wealth gain, approximately $130,000. 60 in growth, 30 in principal repayment, plus tax benefits and equity position improvement. Sarah's outcome, she's still waiting. Her $150,000 is in a savings account, earning, let's say, 3%. After 3 years, it's worth $158,000. She's made $8,000 in the same time that Alex has made $130,000. She's made 8. But here's the worst part. She's still waiting for rates to drop further. She's convinced that if she waits a little bit longer, she'll get a better deal. The property she could have bought 3 years ago, it's now worth even more. So either she needs to wait for a larger correction, or she needs to accept that she's already missed the boat. Her wealth gain, $8,000. And then there's Michael. So Michael's outcome. He's bought one property. It's now worth approximately $570,000. He's paid down his loan by about $15,000. His equity has grown from $150,000 to approximately $190,000. His wealth gain, approximately $80,000. 40 in growth, 15 from principal repayments. So in 3 years, Alex made $130,000. Michael made $80,000. And Sarah made $8,000. And she's still sitting on the sidelines waiting. The spread between Alex and Sarah, $122,000 in 3 years. That's $40,000 per year. And that spread keeps widening every single year that passes. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but what if the market does crash? What if rates spike and the property values fall? That's a great question. Let's say the property market corrects by 15% in the next 2 years. Alex's property is now worth $475,000. Yes, he's down $85,000 in equity. It hurts. But here's what you need to understand. He still owns a property. He still has the equity he's built through rental income. He can refinance. He can wait it out because he's got time on his side and cash flow on his side. Sarah, she's now thinking, I was right to wait. The market didn't crash, but she's still sitting on the sidelines. And Sarah, she's now thinking, I was right to wait. The market did crash, but she's still sitting on the sidelines. And unless she bought at the exact bottom of the market, she's still behind Alex. Because even with his temporary loss, his position is stronger than Sarah's position has ever been. This is the real payoff to the foreshadowing I gave at the start. The person who waited didn't win. They didn't get a better deal. They got a worse deal and missed 3 years of capital growth. So if waiting isn't the answer, what actually makes property investing safe? Because this is the real skill here. Understand what actual risk management looks like in property investing. Safe property investing isn't about timing the market perfectly. It's about 5 things. First, start early enough that time works in your favor. The longer your investment timeline, the more market cycles you capture, the more compound growth works for you. This is why starting at 30 is better than starting at 40, even if the market is uncertain at 30. Second, buy the right property in the right location. Not all properties appreciate the same way. You want properties in suburbs with strong population growth, limited housing supply, and good amenities. This is where due diligence matters more than timing. And third, ensure it's cash flow positive or neutral. You want a property that pays for itself through rental income. This means you're not bleeding money every month and you're capturing the benefits of leverage without the financial stress. And fourth, build a diversified portfolio over time. Don't put everything into one property in one suburb. Buy across different locations, different price points, different property types over years. This reduces your risk significantly. And finally, fifth, have a long-term holding strategy. Property wealth isn't built in 3 years. It's built over 10, 20, 30 years. The person who holds one property for 30 years beats the person who tries to flip in and out multiple times. When you combine these 5 things, property investment becomes as safe as it gets because you're leveraging time, you're leveraging multiple properties, you're leveraging cash flow, and you're leveraging compound growth. That's actual safety. That's not waiting for the perfect market. That's waiting for a system that works in any market. Look, I know this video has challenged some of your thinking around waiting. And if it has, that's good. That means you're actually considering a different approach. Before you go, I want you to do 2 things. First, if you found this breakdown valuable, hit like, because when you do, it tells the algorithm that this is content worth showing to other Australians who are thinking about property investing. It genuinely helps us reach more people. Second, drop a comment below. Tell me what's actually been stopping you from starting. Is it money? Is it confidence? Is it uncertainty about where to buy? Because I read every comment and your answer might just be the topic of our next video. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now because we release content every week that breaks down the actual wealth building strategies that work in Australia right now. Not hype, not theory, real data, real examples, real outcomes. Now, here's the thing. Understanding why waiting is expensive is one thing. Actually building a property portfolio is another, because you need a real strategy. You need to know which suburbs to focus on, how you structure your properties for maximum growth, how to time your purchases across your investing timeline, and how to avoid the mistakes that could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why we've created a property investment strategy session for investors who are ready to move from waiting to acting. We'll map out your personal investing timeline, show you exactly which suburbs align with your goals, and give you a real plan for how many properties you could own in the next decade. And if you're interested in actually building wealth instead of talking about it, book a call with our team today. Link is in the description, but I'll warn you, we're pretty selective about who we work with. We only work with investors who are actually committed to taking action. If you're still sitting there on the fence, this probably isn't for you. But if you're ready to stop waiting and start building, let's talk. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.